Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The college basketball season has come to an end, and the portal is on fire. We'll talk about the latest portal news and what it means for Purdue. Plus, we'll start to take a little bit of a look ahead to what will be a very different Purdue team come November, and what could personnel groupings look like for the Boilermakers when they take the floor next season. All of that to come, but first, if you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Even though it's the summer, even though there aren't football or basketball games to break down, still going to be recording podcasts every week. That's the goal, at least. I want to come to you every week all summer as we kind of bridge the gap from now until August when we really get into football preview mode. But until then, follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Send me anything you want to talk about. I'm all ears. Anything, really. I'm open to anything. I'll certainly come up with some stuff. Going to try to have some guests on, do some cool stuff. But anything you guys want to talk about, send it my way. You can also email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Anything you want there. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss a thing over the summer. All of that. But again, getting into it here, the transfer portal is the big story right now in college basketball. It's bizarre how, the transfer portal is open really as soon as your team is done. You could in theory transfer anytime after the bracket's revealed, but it's madness right now. And we're kind of seeing that start to wrap up now that the final four teams are done. We're a week removed from the national championship game. I'm recording this at 9:15, so literally exactly a week removed, really. Now the portal is really, guys are taking visits, guys are committing. There's all sorts of smoke out there. Purdue lost 2 players to the portal this week. It was not exactly earth-shattering news that Mason Gillis and Ethan Morton entered the portal. They're going to use their COVID years elsewhere. Both of those guys still have a COVID year of eligibility to use. Mason Gillis will be his 6th year of college basketball. He played, you'll remember, he redshirted as a freshman back in, that would have been the fall of 2019, and then played the next 4 years, has the COVID year. He's going to use it elsewhere. Ethan Morton, maybe he would have redshirted in that 2020-2021 season had the COVID year not been granted ahead of the season. That season didn't necessarily count for anyone. So he didn't redshirt. He played sparingly. Never forget when he was fresh off mono and had to go play like 20 minutes against Clemson in just his second career game because Eric Hunter and Jaden Ivey were hurt. But he's going to play his last year elsewhere. This comes because returning to Purdue wasn't really a viable option. We've talked a little bit here about the scholarship situation that Purdue finds itself in going into next year. And that is where, even if you assume that Mason Gillis, Ethan Morton, and Zach Edey would all depart and not use their COVID years, that still put Purdue at 14 scholarships. You can only have 13. So this wasn't really a viable option. Unless Purdue had major roster turnover, Purdue would need 2 guys from next year's projected roster to not be there to even be able to entertain bringing these guys back. That isn't necessarily going to work. That's a bit of a long shot. It's not impossible, but that's not exactly what Purdue was going to bank on. So with that, these guys kind of had 2 choices. You either call it a career from basketball or hop in the transfer portal, see what's out there, play your final season elsewhere. They are probably going to get paid fairly well. I think especially Mason Gillis could stand to make some decent money to play somewhere else next year. Ethan Morton, I don't know what the market is from an NIL perspective, but he'd certainly be a valuable pickup for a lot of teams out there. The COVID year thing is a little complicated because as a whole, I don't like it. I don't think it was ever something that made sense. You gave these COVID years. It started based off the 2020 NCAA tournament being canceled, where everyone who played that season received another year of eligibility, which was nonsensical. Less than 20% of the NCAA in Division I makes the NCAA tournament. Those guys didn't miss out on a season. They missed out on a tournament and a conference tournament. They played an entire season. And then the following year, I mean, look, I know there was COVID going on, but if guys really wanted to preserve that year, maybe they could have opted out and used it on the back end. But giving these guys an extra year when they all played that year, it just doesn't, I don't know. It's done more harm than good for the sport, I think. Now that's not necessarily the case for Purdue. If the COVID year thing has certainly hurt Purdue, but it's helped Purdue. Look at this year's team. Purdue doesn't have Lance Jones if the COVID year is not granted. He wraps up his career at Southern Illinois. He moves on. Who knows where he goes from there? Instead, he comes to Purdue, is a major contributor on a Final Four team that loses in the national championship game. Lance Jones was everything Purdue could have hoped for. That doesn't happen if not for the transfer or the COVID year and the transfer portal, but the COVID year. That was a wonderful addition for Purdue. On the football side of things, you got to remember that Purdue's shining achievement of the last 20 years is winning that Big Ten West title in 2022. And if Aiden O'Connell and Charlie Jones don't have COVID years, I don't think Purdue does that. That probably goes without saying, but Purdue does not win that Big Ten West title if it's not for the COVID year. It's certainly worked against Purdue. I think back to 2 years ago when that Purdue team with Travion Williams, Jaden Ivey, Sasha Stefanovic loses the Big Ten regular season by a game, when you had an Illinois team that was COVID yeared up with Trent Frazier, Alfonso Plummer, Brad Davison up at Wisconsin. Might have been another one there. Might have been another one at Illinois too. It all kind of runs together now. But that's reality. It's a double-edged sword. It's been great for some players, but as a whole for the sport, I don't know that having, guys at 24 years old being the kings of the court is really what college basketball is all about. I know there's the sentiment that it's a real bummer that those two are going to play their last seasons elsewhere, and I completely understand that. That is part of the new era of college basketball, is that fewer and fewer guys are going to be with your team for 4 years. Purdue has been, I don't want to say exempt from that because that's not rooted in reality, but Purdue has had as much continuity as anyone in America. I think Matt Painter said, they'd had maybe the fewest transfers out of anyone over the last 4 or 5 years. That's pretty impressive. So, look, this is a bit of a bummer. They went out on a really strong note, though. This felt like their last run at Purdue. This always was their last run at Purdue. It's not like they came out and explicitly said, we're going to go in the transfer portal after the season, because that wouldn't be appropriate. But this was always kind of assumed that it was either this or walk away from hoops. It's very, very fitting. Their last moment, their last weekend as a Purdue Boilermaker was in the Final Four, because they were a part of that group that got Purdue there. That's how they go out. I think that's a great way for them to wrap up their careers at Purdue. Who knows where they end up? I'm not one that's going to sit here and speculate on destinations. I don't think that's fair to them. I certainly don't have any kind of insider information on that, but they can continue working on degrees. They can go make some money and play basketball for another year. I don't know what type of professional aspirations those guys have. I don't know. I don't know that Ethan Morton's going to be a pro basketball player. Mason Gillis, I have no idea. But whatever they're going to make and whatever they're going to do this year, it beats having a job and being in the real world. On the flip side of the portal, look, Purdue's not going to pursue any transfers as far as I can imagine. I know there have been plenty of discussions of, Purdue needs this, Purdue needs that. Purdue needs 2 transfers to get out just to make this even a possibility. And I don't see that happening. Have crazier things happened? Yes, without a doubt. It's entirely possible. I just don't think it's all that plausible. Now, I could record this, and by Wednesday afternoon, 2 guys are in the portal, and then Purdue's shopping. But I don't know that I see it. You got to remember, too, with the transfer portal, this is all a two-way street. Last year, Purdue had one very obvious need, and it filled it. And I remember there being a conversation of, Purdue has one more scholarship. Why doesn't it go out and use it? And I kept saying, this is a two-way street. Unless you are going out to the portal with just the biggest bag out there, you've got to make sense for that player to come play for you. It has to be something that clicks. Because if there's no sense, then what are you doing? A guy doesn't go in the portal to play less unless he's a mid-major or non-D1 guy just wanting to get to that point. Guys don't transfer, from Power 5 to Power 5 to play less. I don't know how much of a bag Purdue would be throwing around if it was active in the portal. I'm not privy to NIL details or any information like that. But it's not Purdue's approach to build through the portal. Purdue has made it very clear over the past so many years right now that it's going to build through the high school ranks. It's going to supplement its roster through the portal when it can and when it needs to. But that's not going to be Purdue's bread and butter, nor should it be, if you ask me. It's a very volatile way to build a roster, and that's at least what I've observed to this point. We are still very early on into the transfer portal era to make sweeping conclusions. But it's hard to argue with Purdue's results thus far. Purdue has been one of the best programs in the country over the past handful of years, and Purdue doesn't take a lot of transfers. If you take a lot of transfers, it's possible to knock it out of the park. You could be, just from a basketball skill perspective, you could be like Illinois, where you get Terrence Shannon Jr. and Marcus Damask. On the court, those guys were incredible. 2 really, really good players that propelled Illinois to the Elite Eight. They don't sniff that without those 2. But it also can be a double-edged sword because you can bring all these guys in and it just doesn't click. I mean, look at Maryland. That certainly didn't work for them this year. Look at Arkansas. A bunch of transfers came in, and that place was a disaster, even though it did beat Purdue in a scrimmage game. It's a really volatile way to build a roster. Purdue's not going to be involved in it too much. We'll see. We'll see what time does and what time tells us about these different approaches. But these guys want to play, and if Purdue's not throwing around the biggest bag, there's not a clear path to playing time in a lot of positions. After the break, got one question to answer here. Going to go fairly deep into it about potential personnel groupings for next year. First, this episode is brought to you by me. Yes, me. When I'm not watching sports, or more accurately, talking about them, I'm talking insurance with the people of Indiana. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I want to help you protect what you've worked hard to achieve. From home and auto to life and business insurance, I'm here to help you. Give me a call at 317-692-7463 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's protect you from life's everyday risks. So I got a question from Twitter that I wanted to dive into pretty deep here. And the question is, do you think Matt Painter will try a lineup of Cannon Catchings, Trey Kaufman-Renn, and Caleb First? What different lineups do you think we could potentially see on the court at one time? In terms of that proposed lineup, where you have Cannon Catchings, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb First at the 3-4-5, I'm sure that's something that Purdue may tinker with at some point. Next year is not going to be like this year, where Purdue rolled out the same lineup for all 39 of its games. That is really hard to pull off, just when you consider the fact that injuries can happen, twisted ankles can happen, guys can get sick, all sorts of stuff can happen. And that wasn't at all something Purdue had to deal with. So that's not sustainable. That's not repeatable, but it doesn't need to be. I think Purdue is going to play around a little bit next year, especially, throughout games. Purdue was in a pretty defined rotation pattern this year. It changed up a little bit as the season progressed, and Cam Heide started playing more, and Miles Colvin started playing more. Ethan Morton, Caleb First started playing less. But just as a whole, Purdue's rotation pattern was pretty defined. Next year, it's going to look a lot different because you have so many more unknowns and so many more moving parts to next year's team. After all, half the roster is coming in as freshmen. So it's going to look a lot different. When you look ahead to the personnel pieces and the different personnel groupings, you have Braden Smith, you have Fletcher Lawyer, and you have Trey Kaufman-Renn. Those guys are established foundational pieces for your team, and really for your team for the next 2 years. But those guys have been out there. They've done it. They've been around for 2 or 3 seasons. In the case of Trey Kaufman-Renn, they've played some basketball for you. Those are your main building blocks. You have Camden Heide and you have Miles Colvin. I think those two are primed to make a real jump. They have the ability. You look at some of the athleticism they have to offer. Miles Colvin's a real shot maker. Camden Heide can be as well. He shot really well on low volume. Those guys can be really big time additions, and not really additions, but injections into that group, and scoring pieces into the lineup. Up front is where it gets interesting, and I think it starts with Caleb First. He has a real opportunity here to finish his career with a strong senior season. It's been tough. It's probably impacted him as much as anyone that Zach Edey turned into one of the best college basketball players of all time, because Caleb First, almost to this point, you look at it and say his best basketball he's played at Purdue was in his first month when he was starting while Mason Gillis was suspended in the fall of 2021. He was really good for Purdue in that MTE out at Mohegan Sun. He did some great things. But as he has had to share minutes and his minutes have declined, it's been harder for him to have consistency. Now, there's a real opportunity for minutes. And if you're, looking at it from a glass half full perspective, he does some really positive things. He moves really well. If he can shoot the ball a little bit more like he did that year, then I think you feel comfortable with him being a nice asset out there. You look behind him. What's Will Berg capable of? He looked all right in garbage time this year, but that's just garbage time. And it wasn't really against high-level opponents for the most part. It's a big year. To a certain degree, it feels a little now or never. It's not, but it feels a little bit like that when you have another year for Trey Kaufman-Renn after 2 more years of him. You have Raleigh Burgess. You have Daniel Jacobson. You got a lot of options. So I don't know. We'll see what he does. I don't know what to expect from him. He's shown some flashes, but that doesn't always mean a ton. You've got this freshman class, and there's a lot there. Caden Catchings is going to be a play right away guy, obviously. One of the top recruits to ever commit to Purdue. I think Jakari Harris probably will as well. So you've got a backcourt option in Harris, a wing guy in Catchings. And then with the rest of these 4, I really don't know. How ready is Daniel Jacobson? I've heard good things. I've heard the thought that Purdue got a real steal there. He reclassified up a year to get to Purdue early. So How ready is he? Same deal with Raleigh Burgess. Guy had a significant injury while he was in high school, was able to come back from it, and seems to be all good, but that's still substantial. Where's he at in his development arc? Is he ready to contribute? In that backcourt, CJ Cox, Jack Benter, I don't really know what to expect from day one there. Are they redshirt candidates? Are they not? I don't know. But even right now, Purdue's at 12 guys. We'll see. I think you really have 8, 9, maybe even 10 guys who are going to be pushing for playing time. And if that's the case, Purdue's going to be in pretty solid shape. Purdue's going to be in a good spot to really build around Braden Smith. He's going to be the ignition to the offense, and then you go from there. But you're going to see a lot of mix and match. I mean, Braden Smith's going to play a ton. I think Trey Kaufman-Wren's going to play a ton. Fletcher Lawyer's going to play quite a bit. From there, your guess is as good as mine. I know everyone likes to speculate about starting lineups, and I know everyone likes to argue about what needs to be done or what doesn't. Look, it almost always works itself out. Purdue has been operating at a really high level for a number of years now, and while next year may not be another trip to the Final Four, I do think Purdue has enough there to be a competitive team in the Big Ten and to be a top 25 team, to push for higher than that. There's still quite a bit there. The cupboard is not bare. It doesn't have Zach Edey in it anymore. It's not a 7'4" tall cupboard, but it's still a pretty good roster that I think you can be pretty excited about. That's what I've got for today. Next week, we're going to really take a deep look back at the year that was for Purdue, a year that should absolutely be celebrated, be remembered as one of the best in school history. Going to look back into that in some detail next week, and then at some point here soon, going to do a football look, probably as the portal window winds down here a couple weeks out. So, again, that's all I've got for today. Appreciate you listening and spending your time with me. Until next week, follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Send me questions there or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Till next time, take care, guys.